Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. I'm looking at a very special book this morning, which has come to us. It's from Carta Publishing and it's called Magna Carta Uncovered. It's been written by two very eminent people, Anthony Ardage, Queen's Counsel, and Igor Judge, who was, until recently, the Lord Chief Justice. The book itself is a very important one because we're celebrating the 800th anniversary commemoration this year at Runnymede, and we've given it a title, 800 Years On, a 21st Century Statement on Magna Carta. Now, my wife Elizabeth and I have written this book, and as I say, it's one that I treasure. It's a nice book. There's Runnymede Island right at the front. You can see that. It's a boggy little plain. There's the spine. There's nothing much on the back. The actual Magna Carta itself is actually on the front cover. Now inside, it's a paperback. You've got a dust cover and you've got some information there concerning what's actually in the book itself, and then some very short information about the authors. And what you do have is, again, a lot of a very detailed, extremely well written text, as I would expect. Good footnotes there, and at the back something of great importance, certainly an index. It's just over 220 odd pages long. There's the index there. Then what you have at the back is a whole series of appendices, and we start off with sources, then we go through to the rebel barons, who they were, so there's a lot of detail here, a lot of them involved, a translation of Magna Carta, which is extremely helpful. You can also buy a copy of it if you go to Runnymede. The Petition of Rights 1628 is set out in Appendix D, the Bill of Rights 1689, Appendix E, and the Bill of Rights 1789 from the United States, Appendix F. Then there's a very detailed bibliography. I'm very impressed with this book. It's, I think, a leading authority. There's a nice little statement at the front. Then there's the main front page. Acknowledgements. They've done a lot of research. These people are very well known, a very learned gentleman. That's the contents page itself, and then there's just again a little bit about the authors. Then we launch into a timeline. Now the timeline is well worth looking at because it runs all the way through the start of Henry II's reign, and then the way it all sort of ran through until they chased John to Runnymede, and then what happened afterwards, and all the attempts to stop it, and all the other things. Then we got a nice introduction. And as I say, it's extremely well written, and a book I will treasure. Certainly when we think of what we're doing this year with the commemorations, because there's a lot happening, certainly in this country and abroad. Now, Elizabeth and I have written a review, and this is what we say about this book. As I say, it's a special book. Worried about threats to your liberty? Invoke Magna Carta. So many people do, although ironically, in this year of 2015, so few people have actually read it. This is not terribly surprising, because despite its historic significance and the amount of learned commentary about it, the translation, the full translation that is, has not really been readily available, at least not at every newsagent's in town. So in this 800th anniversary year, the public consciousness, we think, has been raised in anticipation of the planned celebrations, and the situation is more than likely to change, we hope. You can now read Magna Carta in its magnificent entirety in the aptly named Magna Carta Uncovered, a new book from Carta Publishing, co-authored by the former Lord Chief Justice, Igor Judge, Lord Judge, and Anthony Ardage, Queen's Counsel. It's an important book. It is the book of the moment. It is a plain-speaking 21st century appraisal of a 13th century legal document which, even in the absence of specific statements on human rights as such, has set the standard for rights and liberties the world over, even though it has been challenged, threatened, belittled and ignored in every century since, including our own. But read the translation and you cannot help noticing that despite the dismissive remarks of some commentators today, at least half the clauses in the Charter can be construed as being still relevant. Clause 40 is the best known. Quote, "To no one will we sell, to no one will we deny or delay right or justice." That, in the view of any reasonable reader, does include everybody, not just a band of privileged and rebellious barons, as a number of pundits have claimed. From 1331 to 1351, statutes extended the right against arbitrary action by the Crown to, quote, "all men of whatever condition whatsoever." Lamentably, history reveals how often these provisions have been criminally ignored, and yet the spirit of Magna Carta, the Great Charter, lives on. Interestingly, a number of clauses limit the power of bailiffs, which should resonate with quite a few people today, and an insistence that people with such powers should at least be qualified for their jobs. Quote, "We will not make," that's appoint, "justices, constables, sheriffs or bailiffs who do not know the law of the land and mean to observe it well," thunders clause 45. And by the way, note the timeline which I showed you at the beginning of the book, which I think gives you a bit of a picture, because it lists the significant events leading to Magna Carta itself, beginning in 1154, when Henry II ascended the throne of England. The decades which followed featured widespread strife, civil unrest and foreign wars, which under King John had emptied the treasury by 1214. Finally, after further rebellion by the infuriated barons, the charter was granted at Runnymede on the island in that boggy plain, dated the 15th of June 1215. But, as most of us now realise, this was not the end of the story. A month later, John, who was observed at the time gnashing his teeth and biting on twigs in fury, wrote to the Pope requesting that the charter be annulled, which the Pope duly did, declaring it void. After King John's death, however, and following years of regency, the charter, newly dubbed Magna Carta, that's the Great Charter, was reissued in perpetuity under the seal of John's heir, the young Henry III. In all, the book tells a gripping tale of the conflict and drama, including civil war. Note the chapter on Robin Hood and the royal forests, which brought Magna Carta to birth and ensured its survival and indeed veneration over the centuries. Also compulsive reading are the book's 6 appendices, which I showed you at the beginning. They include subsequent documents directly influenced by Magna Carta, including the Petition of Rights 1628, the Bill of Rights 1689, and the Bill of Rights 1789 from the United States. Let me conclude by saying this. Lord Judge has remarked Magna Carta should in this anniversary year be enthusiastically celebrated, and with that thought in mind, this quite enthralling book should receive an enthusiastic reception from laymen and lawyers alike. And I think this book is actually very appropriate for any general readership, and in fact Carta to be absolutely congratulated for producing such an excellent work. There it is, a rather nice Runnymede with a river in the background and the island itself. It's very boggy there. You do need Wellingtons if you go. There's the index again at the back. Let me just show you the timeline again, because that is important. It's very helpful, the route to Runnymede itself. I mean, many of you will remember from your history, probably at school, a little bit about this. And there's a lot of fiction. It was never signed, it was only sealed because King John couldn't read and write. He knew enough, though, to take all the money and then lose it in the wash. There are the footnotes. There are lots and lots of footnotes, which are extremely helpful. But as I say, they've done a huge amount of work on this book. And then again, just to remind you, the Bill of Rights, 1689 there. And finally, the Americans, who have taken this very much to their heart. This is the 1789 version. And in fact, the commemoration at Runnymede is not shown in this picture, but the actual commemoration itself was produced by the American Bar Association. It's an interesting place to go to, and this is a very important charter. John loved to produce charters, lots of charters in lots of English towns and villages, including the one I was born, in Amersham, granted for fairs, all this sort of stuff. But this charter stands out as the best. So thank you to the two authors and Hart. Do read this book if you can, and just remember what we went through 800 years ago and where we are today. We must keep these great rights that we have. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.